and welcome everybody to the panel on how to build a more connected, resilient, and humane world. Well, yesterday we had a panel, I don't know if you were on it, with the title How Not to Destroy Our World, with Stuart Russell and Kenneth Cukier. And in the beginning, they asked everyone in the audience if they are optimistic about the future of AI. And actually the majority was, and I found this quite remarkable because, well, there are so many reasons to be pessimistic and to think of possible scenarios what could go wrong with AI. So AI could, well, destroy the world potentially. It can take our jobs. It may threaten our privacy, our data security. It may change global power balances, and it endangers democracy. So there are many reasons to be pessimistic, and I'm quite happy that apparently you are optimistic. But still, I think it's important to talk about the risks, to think about what could possibly go wrong, but also to think about the way how we imagine a better future, how we want to use AI to help us making the world a better place. And I'm really happy to welcome 3 people here on the stage who all work on this project to make the world, the future world, a more ethical place. From very different directions. So we have the perspective of philosophy, as you already heard, the perspective of security and communication and, well, safety of connections among the people, and the perspective well, of investment and industrial, the industrial perspective, the economy perspective. And yeah, I welcome again Meredith Whittaker. She is the president of the Signal Foundation. Well, you all know Signal. It's your favorite and the most widely trusted private messaging app. And previously, she was the co-founder of the AI Now Institute. She has advised many governments and civil society organizations on artificial intelligence, so I'm really happy that you're here to share your perspective with us. Then Bradley Horowitz, to my left, he's general partner of Wisdom Ventures, where he works with founders on building thoughtful, human-centered technology companies. Previously, he worked as a vice president of product at Google. And Edward Harcourt, he's the director of the Institute for Ethics in AI, a professor of philosophy at the University of Oxford, where he teaches and writes on ethics, free will, and moral psychology. And, well, the foundation, the premise of our panel is that the world is going to change a lot, given that AI has an influence in so many fields and on so many things. And so my first quick question to all of you would be, given that we face this dramatic change, in your view, which aspect of this change will be most challenging for us as humans? And what do you think?
Well, to give a full ranking of all the different risks to humanity would take a very long time. So I was just going to pick one, not because I die in a ditch defending the thought that it's the worst one, but I haven't heard anybody mention it yet today. And it's just the danger of the corruption of the historical record. So a little while back, during my lifetime, it was just books. And then digitization happened, and we had the internet and e-books and so on. And there was a brief moment when we thought, everything's just as reliable as it was before, but it costs less, and it's easier to find, and it's easier to search. And then suddenly AI deepfakes happened, and it's become very, very easy it's very difficult to forge a piece of parchment. It's very easy to fake, as we know, any digital record. So all I would say, and that worries me deeply, because those of you who follow the GB news will know that a certain police chief in Britain got into terrible trouble recently because he cancelled a football match on the basis of some previous acts of violence that a chatbot told him had happened and didn't happen at all. So don't throw out your paper.
Yeah, thank you. That's worrying indeed. So does it resonate with you, Meredith?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, I want to push a little bit on the inevitability framing, noting that the term artificial intelligence itself is not a technical term. It has been applied to a lot of different approaches to creating technology that we assume acts in one way or another, kind of like humans, as assessed by different benchmarks and evaluations and opinions. And right now, what we're talking about is a very large-scale, deep learning-based approach that was reanimated after AI winters and sort of dismissing its utility in the early 2010s, because it was recognized that when you had a ton of data, like, say, a platform company, and a ton of compute, like, say, a platform company, you could do new things with these old techniques. And so what we are talking about, and that often gets collapsed into some sort of tip of the spear of scientific progress at the end of a positivist arc that is leading all humanity, that we, as this undifferentiated pronoun, are somehow going to grapple with, is in fact a technology that is derivative of a very particular business model that emerged at a very particular moment in time due to very specific historical circumstances that was centered in the US, that allowed a number of companies in the US to grow communications and platform networks that are monopolistic in form, that gathered this data, that gathered the infrastructure that were able to create and now dominate this AI. So I really worry in the future that we forget this material specificity and that there are people at the center of it, that there is a geopolitical set of actors who control these technologies, and that our epistemic environment, what we know about the world, how our labor processes, how our governments, how our bureaucracies work around the world, will ultimately be remote controlled by a handful of centralized actors who have naturalized their dominance as scientific progress and an inevitable fact of our lives in a way that degrades all of us as we hit climate thresholds that are going to be very difficult to tackle if we can't be adults and deal with difficult problems and redistributions of power and resources.
Yeah, thank you, Meredith. So it's a
You're
big
welcome.
challenge that concepts like AI get a life of their own, and that they, that we tend to forget important levels of concepts. So we should try to be specific here in that discussion, even though, we always see how challenging this is. So Bradley, what would be your answer?
I'm going to go from the sublime to the ridiculous and air one of my personal problems, which is I have two daughters that are sort of young adultish, 20 and 23. And as the younger one, the 20-year-old, was growing up, her passion was dance. And we tried very hard not to be tiger parents. We encouraged her dance, but always never at the expense of studying, and making sure she was a good student. And she was very self-motivated and a great student. She's now at UC Berkeley studying biology, and she still loves dance. She's a ballroom dancer. And so now when she comes to me, and she doesn't often come to me, but when the topic of her future and career comes up, I think 5 years ago, I would have been in that same sort of parental condescending mode, sort of, dance is okay, honey, but keep with the studies. And now I'm just like, go dance. And it's her passion, she loves it, and I don't think AI's coming to take that away from her. And so I don't know about the biology side. That is likely another career that's in the process of changing very fast. But the dance is something I know she loves and is passionate about, and I think I am just a more full-throated endorsement with no caveats. I just want her to enjoy herself and dance.
Thank you. So this brings me to my first question, because, I think rarely has the question been so much in focus what the nature of humanity is. So AI is acquiring more and more abilities that we so far thought are defining us as humans. And so the question is, what will be setting us apart from AI also in the future? And of course, this question is a philosophical one. People have thought about this and asked this question for thousands of years. But of course, it's an important question, and it's the right time, I think, to ask this question. And this is why I'm so happy that we have a philosopher here on the stage. So, Edward, do you think that we still learn something new regarding this question in our interaction with AI?
Yes, I do. In fact, I think the question, so most conversations about AI, or most of those that I've taken part in, start with the question, well, look, here's what humans can do. How far can we develop this technology so that they can mimic what we do or replicate what we do, so that it's like moving towards a total eclipse of the sun. How many of the human abilities are going to get covered by this other planet that's moving over it? And I think that should focus our attention on the question, what is unique to us? And I don't mean what outcomes can only we achieve. What I mean by what's unique to us is what difference to the value of human activity is distinctively made by the co-presence of other human beings. Okay? What difference is distinctively made by having other human agents and only human agents in the picture? And we're terrible at answering that question. And the reason we're so terrible at answering the question is that we're quite unused to having any rivals. So until very recently, maybe even now, but until very recently, the only intelligent life or the only intelligent entities on this planet were us. So asking what's the difference between doing something that's very, very good at calculation or very, very good at processing information and factoring out what was distinctively contributed by the fact that the thing doing the calculating or the thing processing the information was a human being, wasn't a question worth asking. And that's why we're so bad at answering the question now. But it's become very urgent because there are these other intelligences competing with us.
Just
and
a short question, what about animals? So this is just an extra case,
well,
right? That
animals
makes it
maybe.
complicated?
Actually, I'm more sympathetic to the idea that value can be contributed to an activity by the co-presence of another animal than I am to the idea that it can be contributed by the co-presence of a machine, but in a very limited way. But animals react to facial expressions in much the way that we do. There's quite a lot of the hardwired reactivity to the human presence, particularly in domestic animals, that we find in our conspecifics in one another. And just to give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about, a family member was recently bereaved. She came to London. We were thinking, what can we do to entertain this poor woman? We don't want it to be too much fun because she's just lost her husband, but we don't want it to be too miserable because we want to take her out of herself. So ChatGPT, what do you do with somebody who's recently been bereaved? First thing it says is, first of all, let me say so sorry for your loss. And I said, what is this nonsense? You're a machine. One thing that the machine cannot do, however brilliantly and contextually appropriately it can mimic the words that a human being would say, the one thing it can't do is to commiserate with you. And it can't commiserate because it can't suffer. It's meaningless to hear those words from another human being. Or even if it makes you feel good, even if it gives you a warm feeling, the one thing it can't be doing is commiserating because it's incapable of suffering, it can't be born, it can't die. All these facts about one another that we carry in the backs of our minds and which give meaning to our interactions with one another. I'll give you another example. Sharing information. I might want to know what a good restaurant to go to, and so I ask Google AI, and it'll say, okay, you're in Munich, go to this. That has a value. It has an instrumental value because I'll get a nice dinner this evening or tomorrow evening. But one thing that is missing from that transaction is no living creature has shared its views with me. And if the only things from whom you ever receive information are humans, why would you ask, well, let me try and analyze what's going on here when somebody makes a restaurant recommendation. How much of the value of that transaction resides in the goodness of the restaurant, and how much of the goodness of the value of the transaction resides in the fact that it was another human being sharing their mind with me? Now you can get information out of machines, makes a huge difference. And that difference will go by the board if we don't have a better understanding of the way in which human interaction confers value on activity. If we wake up to it too late, if we lose that, if we don't work harder to develop our self-understanding of the value the co-presence of other humans makes for our lives, we will only wake up too late to what we've lost.
Well, but the interesting thing is that many people seem not to care about this. So there are thousands of people who say that they are in a happy relationship with an AI bot. And so your argument, I think, is valid. Everybody can agree with that, but it's still the question, why are so many people happy in their conversations with AI bots?
Good question. I mean, one quick response to that might be to say there are a lot of people who suffer from delusions. But do you want the world to contain lots of people suffering from delusions? That's a little bit of a glib answer. What I would say is, a better analogy would be children and teddy bears. They can have rewarding relationships with toys whom they talk to, but, and particularly as they grow older, they get very good at distinguishing between when they're engaging in creative play and when they are suffering from an illusion. And I think we need to educate young people so that when they interact with chatbots, they can draw that distinction with the bots too.
Well, I think it's certainly a problem that humans are delusional. They have the tendency to see humans and human emotions in non-living things. That's already the case with chatbots, but as you all know, we are in the midst of a development that, to me, is even more scary. Right now we witness the development of agents, right? So that we not only talk to AI, but we also use them as autonomous assistants that we can use to do jobs for us by telling them what to do and relying on them somehow to find a way how to fulfill our goal without asking for permission. And of course, this is a development that also comes with a lot of risks, and especially also in terms of connections between people and in terms of data security. And Meredith, so my question to you would be, Signal enables secure connections between people, so it really guarantees secure connections. And part of your philosophy is that you use as little information, as little data as possible. And of course, the philosophy of agents has to be the opposite. They need huge amounts of data. So how dangerous are AI agents for your mission?
Yeah, great question, and I'm glad I didn't have to answer his question. So Signal is the only large-scale communications platform that provides truly private and secure and encrypted messaging and communications, at the scale that we do. We're core infrastructure for militaries, for governments, human rights workers, anyone who is in a position to know that communication security is often a matter of life and death. There's a reason that the military strikes will often take out the communication networks first, because you can't strategize if you can't talk. This is fundamental. So we carry that responsibility, with a lot of gravity. We take our responsibility very, very seriously because we know people's lives depend on it. We protect the integrity of those communications by being open source. That means you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to like me. You don't have to believe me. You can go to our repos and you can check the code. Every new release goes onto GitHub and you can verify that what I am saying is true. And we created the Signal protocol, which is the gold standard for encryption, messaging encryption. It's been around for over 10 years. Trevor Perrin and Moxie Marlinspike authored that, and it has been tested and examined by security experts, cryptographers, everyone. If you found a vulnerability in the Signal protocol, you get hired anywhere, because we put it out there because we want to make sure you're not just relying on us, that we really are robust. And so we're the platform that does that, but of course we have to trust the operating system, right? We have to trust that the water we swim in isn't full of pollutants that are going to erode the sort of protections. And that's where this agentic deployment becomes a real effing problem. Because what we are seeing in the name of agency, which again is not a technical term, it's sort of an aspiration. An agent is something with contextual awareness, situational awareness that knows the environment it's operating in with a lot of specificity in order to operate autonomously to achieve a goal. So what does that mean in practice? It means it has access to all your data, and it's able to take actions on your behalf, or purportedly, without asking explicit permission. So what we are seeing is the early implementation of agentic systems into the operating system. That is the water that Signal and every other application swims in. It's not something we can control, and we have to trust it, because through the history of computing, you can go back to Unix, you can go back before, if you're a developer, the operating system was a set of tools. You manage memory, you manage your processes, you're able to use those as a developer to build your software and make sure that your software runs and sort of plays nice with the other software on there. And as a user, you can sort of control those things, put something in a sandbox maybe, or sort of configure those, mess with your file system. We are seeing a paradigmatic shift, I think, in computing history that my colleague Udbhav Tiwari and I have called sort of the velvet glove coup, in which these operating systems are being given, effectively controlled by these AI companies who are putting agentic systems into the operating system that are doing things like, reading, that for Microsoft we call screenshotting everything you do on your desktop, using ocular character recognition, which extracts the text and puts it into a database to create a log of what you were doing on your computer, so you could ask Microsoft Recall, hey, what was I doing 3 months ago? That log, of course, until we used a remedy to fix this, would contain your Signal desktop messages, which effectively nullifies the entire point of Signal, the integrity of our encryption, and creates an extraordinarily vulnerable backdoor that could be exploited by anyone who is able to prompt inject that agent or get access to your desktop machine. Maybe they're the administrator at your company or what have you. And now we have not seen the full-fledged integration of these, but what we have seen is marketing rhetoric and hype and promises that could only be achieved by the complete decimation of that early paradigm of the operating system as a tool that Signal, as a developer, and users can trust, to a remote-controlled set of resources that is ultimately in the hands of the companies who are controlling these agents.
Yeah, so this means critical infrastructure in the end is at stake, because, well, data security is the foundation, the basis of freedom of speech, freedom of information. So this shows that it also has a huge political dimension in the end.
Yeah, this is the kind of proposal that, like, 10 years ago at Google, if you had a junior product manager who proposed something like this in front of like a director, VP of engineering, you would get fired, because this is like such a terribly dangerous architecture. This is cybersecurity 101. Like, obviously you don't do this, right? And so there is a way that I think, like, again, like, obviously AI is not a human. My God, like, obviously we're dealing with complex technical systems, software and hardware, and data and compute, right? These aren't actually human beings, but we have mythologized them and almost tied ourselves in knots, kind of drinking the Kool-Aid, such that, like, the basics of cybersecurity 101, engineering hygiene, how do you make sure data is protected, because there's actually real stakes to that, seem to be falling by the wayside in this sort of juggernaut of FOMO and hype and sort of close your eyes until AGI comes, and then maybe AGI will, like, back-propagate a solution to all of this. Yeah. But none of that is evidenced.
Thank you, Meredith. Well, it's a hugely important topic, and I'm panicking a little bit because the time is running out.
Oh my
so
God,
now,
I'm
Bradley,
sorry.
you have to bring us back into the positive and optimistic future of the vision of the future. Because, well, with your venture fund, Wisdom Ventures, on your webpage, you can read, or it reads that you are supporting a future of wisdom, mindfulness, and human flourishing. So this sounds like a really high goal. How can we achieve this?
Okay, I'll bring it home in 3 minutes. So I read something last night from Cory Doctorow, who's one of the great pundits of our time, and he differentiated between optimism, which he defined as sort of the a foolhardy belief that left to its own devices and inertia, things will end up okay, and hopefulness, which is much more active in his definition. And he said he's not an optimist, but he's hopeful. And so to borrow that, I'm hopeful. And the reason I'm hopeful is because we have great minds like Meredith and Edward that are thinking, and legal frameworks and policy folks I just really applaud and deem them absolutely crucial to a successful future together. What else we need is, on the optimistic side, to use technology, and I won't just refer to AI because I agree with Meredith that the definition is vague, but technology to solve some of humanity's biggest problems. And I'm talking the ones that we've almost given up hope for solving, things like disease, aging, depression, loneliness. And I think we're at a moment where actually technology, just like a thorn removing another thorn, can actually be applied to solve some of these biggest problems. So we are a venture firm unlike most venture firms. In fact, in our founding team, we have two amazing Buddhist teachers, Jack Cornfield and Young Pueblo, whose real name is Diego Perez. And we're really using the vehicle of the cap table to be activist investors. And I don't mean in the sense of Bill Ackman and sort of deposing the management team and installing one of our own, but active investors who support the good intentions of founders that are setting out on a path, but we know that path will be fraught and lured with temptation due to business models and due to pressures and due to quarterly earnings, et cetera. So almost all founders on day zero start out with good intentions, at least the ones that we will choose to fund. And our job as investors is to really help them along this really fraught and dangerous journey so that we can end up with technology that really serves humanity and works to bring us together as opposed to disconnecting us from ourselves and from others.
And how big is your influence? So is this really something that you can do, that you can bring them back on track when they...
Well, I don't want to overstate that. I will also say we are investors in both OpenAI and Anthropic. And one of the reasons we're in both of those companies, it's sort of like Doctors Without Borders. Usually an investor will pick one. We sort of showed up and said, we're not on either of your side. We're on the side of humanity. We're here to help. And so to a degree, those companies have a lot of challenges. And AI in general, whether it's job elimination or fake news or hallucinations, but we want to be there, and we think the companies are better off for having us as an influence than just ignoring what's happening. We don't define ourselves as impact investing, but we would like to have an impact, and those two companies in particular are going to have an impact, and we'd like to mitigate the negative impact and try to drag them toward the positive outcomes that I think will serve us all.
Thank you. So a short final question for us when we go home now. So what mission would you give the audience to take home with them? What can we all do to really work for a better future and for a humane and well-connected future, Edward?
Well, I guess I would say we need an improved self-consciousness about our own value, because unless you see what only us can make good about what we're doing, we'll lose it.
Thank you. Meredith?
I observe a lot of people who are very ashamed of not understanding tech or understanding what AI is, and so they don't ask questions they should be asking before they accept it into their systems. So what I will say is there are no dumb questions, and you need to be asking any that come to mind, because oftentimes the answers are going to change your path in terms of which technologies you do and do not rely on.
Thank you. Well, we have lots of opportunity here at DLD to ask all these questions. So, Bradley, what is your mission?
A woman once came up to Gandhi with her child and said, "Gandhiji, would you tell my child to stop eating sugar?" And he said, "Come back in 1 week." So she came back and Gandhi said, "Stop eating sugar." And she turned and asked him, "Why didn't you say that last week?" And he said, "Madam, last week I was eating sugar." And so my ask of you is, the question, can we make technology humane, is a great question, but also can we make humans humane is another great question that I think should be on our minds. And so the work begins inside and in ourselves, and then extends out to the questions we ask and the influence we wield as citizens, as consumers, etc. So I would ask you to start in the inner ring of yourself and then extend that to those you interact with and bring that humanity to every interaction you have, including your interaction with technology.
Thank you. What a wonderful final statement. So join me in thanking this wonderful panel for this insightful discussion.